Episode 27, When You're the Calm One in Chaos. Welcome back, Reasonauts. Hey guys, my name isn't important. The message is, every day is awesome. We just have to get through it. And before we begin, if these conversations have been meaningful to you, subscribe and stay with us each week. Share this episode with someone who may need it. And join us on Facebook. Not for noise, not for attention, just a place where people learning to grow do not have to do it alone. Last week, we talked about refusing to let pain decide who you become, about learning from disappointment without becoming disappointment, about protecting your heart without closing it, about allowing pain to teach you without letting pain author the rest of your story. Because when pain no longer becomes your identity, something unexpected begins to happen. People notice, not because you become louder, not because you become more impressive, because you become steadier. And whether they understand it or not, people can feel that. Today's conversation is not about becoming the strongest person in the room. It is about something quieter. What happens when you become the calm one in chaos? There is something people feel before they can explain it. They may not have words for it. They may not know why the room feels different, why the conversation slows down, why the tension loses some of its grip, or why they suddenly feel a little safer saying what they actually mean. But something changes when a person has learned how to stay steady. Not perfect, not emotionless, not untouched, steady. There is a difference. Calm does not mean you have no feelings. That is numbness. Peace does not mean nothing affects you. That is distance. Real calm is the ability to remain present while emotion is moving. You can be angry and still choose your words. You can be afraid and still remain honest. You can be disappointed and still refuse to become cruel. You can feel the room without becoming the room. That kind of steadiness can be felt before you explain yourself, before you speak, before you try to help. The room feels you because people do not only listen with their ears, they listen through safety, through tension, through pace, through breath, through what happens inside them when they are near you. You have felt this before. Some people walk into a room and everything tightens. They have not said anything yet, but pressure enters. Urgency enters, control enters, defensiveness enters, and everyone starts adjusting. Someone becomes quieter. Someone becomes careful. Someone starts explaining themselves before anyone questions them. Someone starts preparing for an argument. That has not happened yet. And then there are people who walk in and something settles, not because they are weak, not because they are passive, not because they are trying to make everyone comfortable. Something settles because they are not bringing more chaos into the room. They are not demanding that everyone match their urgency. They are not asking the room to regulate them. They arrive with themselves. And that matters. Because sometimes we do not enter a room with ourselves. We enter with everything we have not processed. The argument from this morning, the disappointment from last week, the betrayal from 5 years ago, the fear we never named, the resentment we carried so long, we stopped noticing its weight. And suddenly, the person standing in front of us is paying for something they never did. A question sounds like an accusation because someone else once used questions to control us. A delayed response feels like rejection because someone else once disappeared. A disagreement feels dangerous because somewhere along the way, we learned that disagreement meant love was about to be withdrawn. Yesterday's wound walks into today's room, and if we are not careful, we call that wisdom. We say, I know how people are. I have seen this before. I know where this is going. Maybe. But last week we asked whether pain is teaching us or authoring us. And this is where that question becomes visible. Because unresolved pain does not always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like urgency. Sometimes it looks like control. Sometimes it looks like defensiveness. Sometimes it looks like needing the last word. Sometimes it looks like entering a room already prepared for a fight that nobody else knew was happening. We may call it honesty. We may call it being real. We may call it passion. But sometimes it is unprocessed pain looking for somewhere to land. And when that happens, the room feels it. People begin shifting. Some shut down. Some defend. Some over-explain. Some try to fix. Some become smaller. Some become louder. Not always because they chose to. Because atmosphere influences movement. And that is why this conversation matters. After learning not to let pain decide who you become, the next question is natural. What does your presence carry now? When you enter a room, what enters with you? Peace or pressure? Honesty or judgment? Steadiness or control? Space for truth or a need for people to protect themselves? Now be careful with this. This is not about becoming responsible for everyone's feelings. You are not responsible for every reaction. You are not responsible for every interpretation. You are not responsible for managing the emotional weather of every person around you. Someone can misunderstand your boundary. Someone can become uncomfortable with your honesty. Someone can dislike your calm because they expected you to fight. Their reaction does not automatically mean your movement was wrong, but you are responsible for what you bring, your tone, your posture, your pace, your honesty, your restraint, your presence. Those things enter the room before your argument does, before your opinion does, before your explanation does. And sometimes they determine whether the conversation has enough space to remain human. Think about a room where everyone is tense, voices are sharp, bodies are guarded. People are not really listening anymore. They are preparing to defend, preparing to accuse, preparing to win, preparing to leave. At that point, the conversation is not really a conversation anymore. It is two nervous systems preparing for impact, and then one person refuses to match the storm, not by becoming silent in fear, not by pretending nothing is wrong, not by smiling while resentment boils underneath. They stay grounded, they slow the pace, they do not answer every accusation, they do not chase every misunderstanding, they do not add more heat just because someone else brought fire. They speak clearly when something needs to be said. They stay quiet when another sentence would only make the moment heavier. They keep the boundary, they keep their dignity, and they keep themselves. That person can change the room, not by controlling it, not by demanding everyone calm down, not by becoming the emotional referee. They change the room by refusing to become another source of chaos inside it. That is soft strength. It is strength that does not need to become loud to prove it exists. It is presence that does not need to dominate in order to matter. It is steadiness that says, I can stay here without becoming this. That sentence matters because many people believe the only way to survive chaos is to become chaotic enough to answer it. If they yell, you yell louder. If they accuse, you accuse back. If they become cold, you become colder. If they attack, you prepare to destroy. And sometimes that reaction feels justified. It feels strong. It feels like protection. But if every storm teaches you to become a storm, then the storm is still leading. It chooses your volume. It chooses your pace. It chooses your language. It chooses which version of you enters the conversation. And now, you are no longer moving from your values. You are moving from theirs. That is what we are trying to interrupt. The goal of awareness was never to make you more reactive. It was to give you another choice, to make you more responsible, more present, more able to choose your next movement instead of becoming the reflection of whatever happened around you. That is why calm is powerful. Not because it wins every argument, not because it changes every person, not because it fixes every room. Sometimes the disagreement remains unresolved. Sometimes you do everything cleanly and still have to walk away. Calm does not guarantee the outcome. It protects your ability to choose your movement inside the outcome. It gives you back space, space to listen, space to discern, space to decide whether your voice is needed or whether silence is wiser. Without that space, we react. With that space, we can move. And Human Velocity X has always been about movement, not just motion, not just action. Movement with awareness, movement with responsibility, movement that reflects who you are becoming, not only what you are reacting to. So when you become the calm one in chaos, you are not becoming better than anyone. You are not becoming the judge of the room. You are not becoming the rescuer. You are becoming a person whose inner life is no longer immediately ruled by outer pressure. And people can feel that. Some will feel safer. Some will feel exposed. Some will feel challenged. Some may even become more agitated. Because calm can be uncomfortable to someone who expected your reaction. If they know how to control you through anger, your calm changes the pattern. If they know how to control you through guilt, your boundary changes the pattern. If they know how to pull you into endless explanation, your silence changes the pattern. And when one person stops moving the old way, the whole room has to decide what to do with that difference. That is where we are going now. Not toward control, not toward performance, not toward becoming some perfectly peaceful person who never gets angry, frustrated, scared, or overwhelmed. That is not human. We are talking about something much more practical, becoming aware of what travels with you, because the room feels you before it hears you. And the more responsible your movement becomes, the more important it becomes to ask, what exactly are people feeling when you arrive? When you become steadier, people do not all respond the same way. Some people relax around calm. Others become uncomfortable around it. And that can be confusing, because you may assume that if you become more patient, less reactive, and more grounded, everyone will appreciate the change. But that is not always what happens. Some people will feel safer around you. They will breathe easier. They will speak more honestly. They will stop performing as much. They may not even understand why. They only know they do not feel the same pressure when they are near you. Your calm gives them room to think, room to feel, room to tell the truth, room to slow down without feeling like they are falling behind. For people who are tired of chaos, calm can feel like shelter, not escape. Shelter, a place where they can remember themselves without being pulled into another emotional storm. And that matters, because some people have lived so long around pressure that peace feels unfamiliar. They are used to rooms where they have to prepare themselves, prepare their tone, prepare their face, prepare their explanation, prepare for whatever might be said next. So when they finally encounter someone who does not demand that kind of performance, something inside them rests, maybe only for a moment, but even a moment matters, because sometimes one steady presence can remind another person that not every room is unsafe, not every conversation is a battlefield, not every silence means rejection, not every disagreement has to become a war. That is one way calm affects people. It creates space. But calm does not only comfort. Sometimes calm exposes. Not aggressively, not intentionally, not because you are trying to prove anything. Steadiness simply has a way of revealing what is unstable around it. A quiet person can make a loud room notice its noise. A patient response can make impatience more visible. A steady boundary can make manipulation lose its cover. A calm answer can make another person's reaction look larger than they wanted it to seem. And not everyone wants to see that. Some people are comfortable only when everyone is moving at the same speed as their urgency. If they are anxious, they want the room anxious. If they are angry, they want the room angry. If they are offended, they want everyone gathered around the offense. If they are afraid, they want fear to become the shared language. So when you do not join them, they may feel rejected, even when you are not rejecting them. They may feel judged, even when you are not judging them. They may feel abandoned, even while you remain present, because your refusal to enter the storm can feel like betrayal to someone who believes love means participating in whatever emotion they are carrying. That is important to understand. Some people have confused connection with emotional agreement. They do not only want you to hear them, they want you to feel exactly what they feel. They want your nervous system to confirm theirs. If they are outraged, they want your outrage. If they are panicked, they want your panic. If they are bitter, they want your bitterness. And if you remain grounded, they may not know what to do with you. They may say you do not care. They may say you have changed. They may say you think you are better than them. They may call you distant or cold. But sometimes what they are really saying is, you are not joining the version of me that I have not yet learned how to regulate. That does not make them evil. It makes them human. It means something inside them still believes intensity proves importance. That if a feeling is powerful enough, everyone nearby should have to carry it too. But intensity is not always truth, and urgency is not always wisdom. Sometimes urgency is fear wearing a louder voice. Sometimes anger is hurt trying to protect itself. Sometimes chaos is pain trying to make sure it does not have to feel alone. And when you understand that, you can remain compassionate without surrendering your stability. You can see the person. You can hear the pain. You can respect the feeling, but you do not have to become it. That is where soft strength matters. Without softness, you may become dismissive. You may look at the chaos and decide the person is the problem. You may lose compassion. You may close your heart. But without strength, you may become absorbent. You may let every emotion in the room become your assignment. You may confuse empathy with emotional surrender. You may begin believing that caring requires you to lose your center. Soft strength refuses both. It does not mock the storm, and it does not become the storm. It stays present. It stays honest. It stays rooted. It says, I can care about what you are feeling without handing you control over how I move. That is not distance. That is maturity. Because if your peace disappears every time someone else becomes unsettled, then your peace is not yet fully yours. It is borrowed from the environment, and anything borrowed from the environment can be taken back by the environment. But when your peace becomes rooted, when it grows from alignment instead of circumstance, it can remain present even when the room becomes difficult, not perfectly, not without effort, not every time, but more often. And that changes things, because some rooms are built around reaction. Someone gets loud, and everyone responds. Someone withdraws, and everyone chases. Someone gets offended, and everyone adjusts. Someone creates pressure, and suddenly the whole room begins moving around that pressure. After a while, that becomes the rhythm. No one may say it out loud. No one may even realize it is happening. But the room learns. The family learns. The friendship learns. The workplace learns. The relationship learns. This is how we move here. This is what we avoid. This is who gets protected. This is who gets blamed. This is who gets to be emotional. This is who has to stay controlled. This is who everyone watches before deciding whether it is safe to speak. And once a pattern has been repeated long enough, it can stop looking like a pattern. It just starts looking normal. Then one day, you stop moving the old way. You stop reacting to every tone. You stop apologizing just to end tension. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing every withdrawal. You stop absorbing every mood. You stop allowing urgency to decide your movement. And the room feels it, because you are no longer playing the role the pattern expected you to play. That is when peace can become uncomfortable for people who are depending on your old participation. They may not understand what changed. They may not have language for it. They may only know you are not responding the way you used to. You are not as available to the same pressure. You are not as quick to defend yourself. You are not as easy to provoke. You are not rushing to prove your heart. You are not letting guilt drag you back into movements you have already outgrown. And sometimes that will be called cold. Sometimes it will be called arrogant. Sometimes people will say you are acting different. Sometimes they will say you think you are better than everyone else. But not every accusation is an accurate description of your movement. Sometimes an accusation is simply the sound a pattern makes when it loses access. That does not mean every criticism should be ignored. It does not mean everyone else is wrong. And it definitely does not mean you get to use peace as a shield against accountability. Real calm can still listen. Real peace can still be corrected. Real maturity can still say, I need to look at that. I could have said that better. I missed something. I was wrong there. That matters, because peace without humility can become pride, and calm without honesty can become avoidance. The goal is not to become impossible to reach. The goal is to become difficult to control through chaos. There is a difference. You can remain reachable without being controllable. You can remain open without being absorbent. You can remain compassionate without surrendering your center. You can remain peaceful without pretending nothing matters. That is soft strength. And soft strength is not always convenient for the room, because real peace does not require you to betray yourself to keep a room comfortable. Real peace does not require you to disappear so someone else does not have to grow. Real peace does not require you to say yes when your whole life is telling you no. And real peace does not require you to shrink truth until nobody can possibly be uncomfortable with it. Sometimes, real peace is the first honest boundary a room has ever had to face, and that can feel disruptive, because truth does not always arrive as volume. Sometimes truth arrives as a refusal to argue, a refusal to chase, a refusal to enable, a refusal to carry what does not belong to you, a refusal to punish, a refusal to become cruel, a refusal to keep performing a version of yourself that help the old patterns stay alive. That kind of refusal can be quiet and still powerful. It can be calm and still firm. It can be loving and still final. So when your peace challenges the room, do not automatically assume you should put it away, and do not automatically assume the room is wrong. Stay awake, stay humble, stay honest. Ask what is yours, ask what is not. Ask whether your calm is rooted in love or hiding inside distance. Ask whether your boundary is protecting life or punishing pain. Ask whether the room needs your presence or your absence. And then choose the cleanest movement you can. Not perfect movement, clean movement, responsible movement, movement that keeps your heart alive without letting the room turn it into a weapon. Because when your peace is real, it will comfort some people. It will challenge others. It will expose patterns. It will disrupt old agreements. It will make some rooms safer. And it will make other rooms show you exactly why you had to become steady in the first place. That is not failure. That is clarity. And clarity is one of the gifts of a calm that no longer belongs to the storm. And once people begin feeling your steadiness, something else can happen. They may start bringing you weight. At first, it may feel meaningful. Someone opens up. Someone trusts you. Someone tells you what they have been carrying. Someone says, I don't know why, but I feel like I can talk to you. And there is beauty in that. Because not every person gets to be a safe place. Not every person knows how to listen without immediately taking over. Not every person can sit beside pain without trying to control it, minimize it, fix it too quickly, or make it about themselves. So when someone feels safe around you, that matters. It means something in your movement is no longer threatening them. Something in your presence is giving them room to breathe. Something in your steadiness tells their nervous system, you do not have to perform here. And that is a gift. But even a gift needs structure. Because sometimes when people feel your steadiness, they begin handing you things you were never meant to carry. Not always intentionally. Not because they are trying to use you. Sometimes they are tired. Sometimes they are scared. Sometimes they have carried something badly for so long, they do not know what else to do with it. So when they find someone calm, they lean. And at first, that can feel like connection. It can feel like trust. It can feel like purpose. But over time, if you are not careful, connection can quietly become assignment. Their crisis becomes your urgency. Their confusion becomes your responsibility. Their pain becomes your daily weather. Their choices become your emotional burden. If they are okay, you feel okay. If they are falling apart, you feel like you failed. If they are angry, you search yourself for what you did wrong. If they are disappointed, you start wondering how to fix it. If they spiral, you feel responsible for stopping it. And little by little, you stop being present. You start being consumed. There is a difference. Presence says, I am here with you. Consumption says, I am now responsible for what happens inside you. Presence listens. Consumption absorbs. Presence cares. Consumption carries. Presence remains human. Consumption slowly disappears under the weight of everyone else's storm. And this is where many aware people struggle, because the moment you can see more, you may feel responsible for more. The moment you understand someone's pain, you may feel responsible for healing it. The moment you recognize a pattern, you may feel responsible for interrupting it. The moment you sense what a room needs, you may feel responsible for providing it. But awareness is not assignment. Seeing something does not always mean it belongs to you. Feeling something does not always mean you are called to carry it. Understanding someone's pain does not make you responsible for managing their life. That matters, especially when you become the calm one in chaos, because people may begin treating your calm like a public resource. They may expect access to it, your patience, your listening, your forgiveness, your availability, your ability to remain steady while they remain unregulated. And if you are not careful, you may begin believing your value comes from being needed. That is a dangerous place, because being needed can feel like purpose when sometimes it is only exhaustion with better language. Some people will call you strong because you keep carrying what they refuse to face. Some people will call you kind because you never tell them no. Some people will call you loyal because you keep making room for patterns that keep harming you. Some people will call you peaceful because you never let your own needs interrupt theirs. But that is not peace. That is disappearance. And disappearing is not the same thing as serving. There is a difference between giving and vanishing, between helping and replacing, between loving someone and becoming the structure holding their whole life together. Human Velocity X has never been about disappearing. It is about movement, responsible movement, aligned movement, movement where the mind, the heart, and the body are allowed to tell the truth. Your mind may understand someone, your heart may care deeply for them, but your body may be tired. Your body may already be saying, "This is too much. This is not safe. This is not mine to carry. This pattern is costing me." And if your idea of compassion requires you to ignore your own body, then something is out of alignment. Because real compassion does not require self-abandonment. You can care deeply and still recognize your limits. You can love someone and still need rest. You can understand their pain and still refuse to become its container. You can be steady without becoming available for every storm. That is not cold, that is clean. And clean movement is what keeps love from becoming resentment. Because when you carry too much for too long, even good intentions can begin to sour. You may still show up, but now you show up irritated. You may still listen, but now you listen with a closed heart. You may still help, but every request begins to feel like pressure. You may still say yes, but inside, something is quietly saying no. And that division matters, because the body remembers when the mouth keeps agreeing to things, the rest of you no longer has room for. Eventually, kindness starts losing its warmth. Patience starts becoming performance. Presence starts becoming obligation. And then you may wonder why you feel hard. But maybe you did not become hard because you stopped caring. Maybe you became hard because you kept caring without boundaries. Maybe you became tired because you confused being calm with being endlessly available. Maybe you became resentful because you kept accepting emotional weight that was never yours to carry. That is why steadiness needs boundaries, not because people are bad, because weight is real. Emotional weight is real. Relational weight is real. Spiritual weight is real. And if you keep letting everything land on you, eventually you will not be grounded. You will be buried. Sometimes your presence is the contribution, not your correction, not your solution, not your ability to absorb what everyone else refuses to face. Your presence, your steadiness, your refusal to add more chaos to the room. Some moments do not need you to take over. They need you to remain clear. Some moments do not need another opinion. They need someone who can listen without becoming reactive. Some moments do not need a rescuer. They need someone who refuses to make the storm worse. And that may not feel like enough at first, especially if you learn to prove love by doing something, fixing something, carrying something, saving something. But not every movement has to be dramatic, to be meaningful. Sometimes the most responsible thing you can do is stay present without becoming entangled, to listen without absorbing, to care without controlling, to witness without claiming ownership. That is not passivity, that is maturity, because passivity says, I do not care enough to move. Maturity says, I care enough to move responsibly. And sometimes responsible movement is quieter than the ego wants it to be. The ego wants proof. It wants someone to say, thank you, you fixed it, you made it better, you saved us. But soft strength does not move only for recognition. It moves because the movement is clean. It moves because the moment called for steadiness. It moves because adding more pressure would not have created more life. That is a different kind of strength. Sometimes no one knows how much chaos you chose not to add. No one knows how many words you chose not to weaponize. No one knows how many reactions rose inside you and then passed. No one knows how many times you could have made the moment worse, but did not. And yet, those moments matter They matter because restraint is movement. Silence can be movement. A slower response can be movement. A clear boundary can be movement. Walking away before you become harmful can be movement. Not every movement is visible. Not every movement is loud, but every movement creates direction, and direction shapes a life. This is where you have to ask better questions. Not, how do I fix this? Not, how do I make everyone okay? Not, how do I prove that I care? But, what is mine to bring here? Maybe it is honesty. Maybe it is patience. Maybe it is silence. Maybe it is a boundary. Maybe it is help. Maybe it is distance. Maybe it is nothing more than staying grounded while the room decides what it wants to become. That question changes everything, because when you ask, how do I fix this? Your nervous system reaches for control. But when you ask, what is mine to bring? You create room for discernment. You may discover that you do have something to do. You may need to speak. You may need to intervene. You may need to protect someone. You may need to leave. But now the movement is coming from responsibility instead of compulsion. That is when presence becomes powerful, not because it dominates, because it stays clean. It does not reach for what does not belong to it, and it does not withdraw from what does. You can influence, you can invite, you can support, you can warn, you can encourage, you can hold a boundary, but you cannot become another person's will. You cannot become their readiness. You cannot become their responsibility. And the more deeply you understand that, the freer your presence becomes. Because now you can enter a room without needing to own it. You can listen without needing to solve. You can care without needing to control. You can speak without needing to be obeyed. You can love without needing to be absorbed. That is not cold. That is respect. Because every person deserves the dignity of their own movement, even when that movement takes longer than you hoped, even when it hurts to watch, even when you wish you could make the decision for them. When you become the calm one in chaos, people will hand you weight. Some of it will be appropriate. Some of it will be sacred. Some of it will be the normal weight people share when they love one another. And some of it will not belong to you. Wisdom is learning the difference. Soft strength is having the courage to live that difference without closing your heart. You are allowed to be steady without becoming everyone's shelter. You are allowed to be kind without becoming endlessly available. You are allowed to be compassionate without becoming consumed. And you are allowed to bring peace into a room without letting the room take all of yours. Because if you are going to become an anchor, you also have to learn not to become the ocean floor. There is a difference between being an anchor and becoming an island. An anchor has weight. It has depth. It has a place where it holds. It does not drift with every wave. It does not panic because the water is moving. It does not need the storm to become calm before it remembers what it is. But an anchor is still connected. It is not separate from the boat. It is not somewhere far away, proving that nothing can touch it. It serves a purpose inside relationship. It helps create steadiness without becoming the entire sea. That is the balance. To remain connected without being carried away. To remain open without becoming exposed to everything. To remain loving without becoming available for every demand. To remain steady without becoming unreachable. Because sometimes, after disappointment, we confuse distance with healing. We tell ourselves we are doing better because fewer things affect us. But the question is not only, am I affected? The question is, am I still alive inside? Can I still care? Can I still listen? Can I still be moved by what is true? Can I still receive love without searching for the trap? Can I still offer kindness without feeling foolish? Can I still enter a room without preparing to disappear or defend myself? Can someone disagree with me without immediately becoming dangerous? Can someone disappoint me without becoming proof that everyone eventually will? Can someone get close without having to pay for what somebody else did? Those questions matter, because if the answer keeps becoming no, maybe we have not become steady. Maybe we have become sealed. And there is a difference. A sealed heart does not leak, but it also does not breathe. It keeps pain out, but it also keeps life from moving through it. It looks safe, controlled, protected. But over time, the world around it becomes smaller. Fewer people get close. Fewer conversations become vulnerable. Fewer surprises are allowed. Eventually, nothing can hurt you because nothing can reach you, but nothing can really love you there either. And that is not the freedom we have been moving toward. Soft strength does not ask you to live sealed. It asks you to live rooted. Rooted means you can be touched without being taken over. Rooted means you can be moved without being uprooted. Rooted means you can feel sadness without becoming hopeless. You can feel anger without becoming cruel. You can feel fear without surrendering your direction. You can feel love without abandoning yourself. That is different from being untouched. The goal was never to become a person who feels nothing. The goal was to become a person who can feel deeply and still move responsibly. Because sometimes the calm one feels everything. They feel the tension, they feel the fear, they hear the change in someone's voice, they notice the person who suddenly went quiet. They feel the sadness underneath the anger. They recognize the old pattern trying to repeat itself. They feel the pressure to react. They feel the pull to rescue. They feel the desire to explain themselves. Until everyone understands, they feel it. They just do not let every feeling become a command. That is the difference. A feeling can be real without being in charge. A room can be loud without becoming your leader. A person can be hurting without becoming your identity. A conflict can matter without consuming your whole life. This is what it means to become an anchor. You do not deny the storm. You do not pretend the waves are not real. You do not shame people for being afraid while the water is moving. You simply remember your job is not to become the storm in order to prove you understand it. Your job is to hold your place, to remain connected to what is true, to offer steadiness where you can, to release control where you must, and to stay human while doing both. Because there is another danger here. You can become so proud of not needing rescue that eventually you stop allowing yourself to receive help. You become the person everyone comes to, but you go to no one. Everyone can tell you what hurts, but nobody knows what hurts you. You become dependable, reliable, strong, and completely alone inside your strength. That is not the goal either. An anchor is connected, and so are we. There will be times when you need someone else's steadiness, times when your thinking becomes cloudy, times when your heart is tired, times when the room gets inside you before you realize what happened, times when you need another person to remind you of something you already knew. Receiving that does not make you less grounded. It makes you human. There is a difference between dependence and connection. Dependence says, I cannot stand unless you hold me. Connection says, I can stand and sometimes I'm grateful for a hand. That difference matters because the danger of becoming an island is that eventually you stop needing people in a way that sounds mature but is actually wounded. You say, I don't need anyone. I do better by myself. People are too much. I would rather stay away. I don't have time for drama. And sometimes those words are healthy. Sometimes they mean you are finally leaving what has been harming you. Sometimes they mean you are choosing peace over patterns that keep asking you to betray yourself. But sometimes those words are not peace. They are grief that never healed. They are disappointment that found a philosophy. They are fear that learned how to sound independent. So you have to listen closely. Not only to the words, to the fruit. Does your distance make you more whole or only less available? Does your boundary make you more honest or only harder to reach? Does your solitude restore your heart or slowly teach you that connection is not worth the risk? Does your peace make you more loving or more detached? That is the fruit test, not what the choice sounds like, what it produces. Because almost anything can be given beautiful language. Fear can call itself wisdom. Avoidance can call itself peace. Control can call itself protection. Pride can call itself independence. And isolation can call itself a boundary. The name does not tell you what something is. The fruit helps you see what it is becoming. A boundary that protects life will eventually create more life. Maybe not immediately, maybe not with every person, but inside you, there will be more honesty, more breath, more clarity, more room to love without resentment. But a wall that comes from fear usually creates less life, less trust, less openness, less tenderness, less willingness to be known, and eventually less of you. That is why awareness matters. It helps you ask, what am I protecting? Is this boundary serving life? Am I creating room to recover, or am I disappearing? Am I staying connected to truth, or am I hiding from the possibility of being hurt again? And maybe another question belongs there too. If the right person showed up tomorrow, would I still know how to let them in? That question can tell you a lot, because sometimes we become so skilled at identifying what is unhealthy that we forget we also have to recognize what is healthy. We become experts at spotting danger, but suspicious of safety. We learn every red flag, but forget that life also has green ones. Someone respecting your no, someone listening without trying to control the answer, someone apologizing without demanding immediate forgiveness, someone allowing you to be quiet without assuming rejection, someone celebrating your growth without making your growth about their loss, someone showing up consistently enough that your nervous system does not have to keep guessing. Awareness should help us recognize those things too. Otherwise, discernment becomes nothing more than a more sophisticated form of suspicion. And that is not what we have been building. We all need places where we can rest. We all need silence. We all need distance from what keeps pulling us out of alignment. We all need time where we are not explaining, defending, absorbing, or managing the emotional weather around us. That is healthy. But rest is supposed to return you to life. It is not supposed to become a permanent exile from connection. Solitude can restore you. Isolation can shrink you. Quiet can heal you. Avoidance can hide you. A boundary can protect you. A wall can imprison you. Soft strength learns the difference. It does not force closeness where trust has not been built. It does not open doors that wisdom has closed. It does not call every relationship safe just because loneliness is uncomfortable. But it also refuses to let old pain convince the heart that no one is worth receiving. That is the balance. To keep your heart available to what is healthy while keeping your boundary strong enough to refuse what is harmful, to let love in without letting chaos rule, to stay open without staying unprotected, to stay protected without becoming unreachable. Some people will not understand that balance. They may think if you have boundaries, you must not care. They may think if you stay calm, you must be detached. They may think if you do not chase, you must not love. They may think if you take space, you are abandoning them. But love does not require constant access. Connection does not require self-abandonment. Compassion does not require you to become a landing place for every unresolved emotion someone carries. You can love people and still let them knock. You can care about people and still decide whether the door opens. You can be present and still choose how close something gets. That is not cold. That is stewardship. Stewardship of your peace. Stewardship of your attention. Stewardship of your body. Stewardship of the life you are responsible to live. Because if your peace is constantly being spent on rooms that do not honor it, eventually you will have nothing left to offer the rooms where your presence is actually needed. That is one reason boundaries matter. They do not only protect you from harm, they preserve you for purpose. They keep your heart from becoming resentful. They keep your yes from becoming dishonest. They keep your compassion from becoming performance. They keep your presence from becoming obligation. And when your presence is no longer obligation, it becomes warmer, cleaner, more honest. You are there because you chose to be there, not because guilt dragged you in, not because fear kept you there, not because someone else's chaos took your name and called it responsibility. That kind of presence can be trusted because it is not pretending. It is not secretly resentful. It is not waiting to be rescued from the very relationship it keeps agreeing to carry. It is honest. And honesty creates real connection, not perfect connection, not constant agreement, not closeness without tension, real connection, the kind that can survive truth, the kind that can hold boundaries, the kind where two people can disagree without turning disagreement into abandonment, the kind where one person can have a difficult day without requiring everyone else to have one too, the kind where someone can say, I need space, and the relationship does not immediately become a courtroom, the kind that does not require one person to disappear so another person can feel safe. That is what an anchor offers. Not control, not rescue, not endless availability, a grounded connection to what is true. And when that exists, people can begin to trust that your calm is not a performance. Your kindness is not weakness. Your boundary is not rejection. Your silence is not abandonment. Your steadiness is not superiority. It is simply the way you have learned to move after refusing to let pain turn you into something you were never meant to be. So become an anchor, but do not become an island. Let your life have depth. Let your presence have weight. Let your boundaries have clarity. Let your heart stay alive, because the world does not need more people who are impossible to reach. It needs people who can remain reachable without being ruled. People who can stay connected without being consumed. People who can receive love without surrendering themselves to it. People who can offer love without turning it into ownership. People who can stand in the water without becoming the storm. And when you learn that balance, your calm becomes more than quiet. It becomes trustworthy. There is a kind of leadership that does not announce itself. It does not need a title. It does not need a microphone. It does not need permission from the room before it begins to matter. It simply enters and something changes, not because it demands attention, because it carries responsibility. Some people lead by taking control. Some people lead by being the loudest voice. Some people lead by making sure everyone knows they are in charge. But there is another kind of leadership, quieter, deeper, less interested in being seen, and more interested in what the moment actually needs. That kind of leadership does not ask, how do I become important here? It asks, what would help this room move more responsibly? Sometimes the answer is speaking. Sometimes the answer is listening. Sometimes the answer is naming the truth. Sometimes the answer is slowing the pace. Sometimes the answer is refusing to let the loudest emotion become the leader. That is quiet leadership. And often it comes from people who never intended to lead at all. They simply became responsible for their own movement. They stopped reacting to every storm. They stopped letting pain write their character. They stopped confusing compassion with surrender. They stopped confusing boundaries with isolation. And over time, their presence began carrying weight. Not because they tried to become impressive, because they became trustworthy. Trustworthy people change rooms, not always dramatically, not always instantly, but they create a different possibility. When they speak, people listen differently. When they pause, the room feels the pause. When they say no, the boundary carries clarity. When they say yes, the yes feels honest. When they stay quiet, it does not feel empty. It feels measured. Because quiet leadership is not about performing peace. It is about becoming the kind of person whose movement can be trusted. And trust is not built only by big moments. It is built by repeated small ones. The honest answer, the boundary that does not become punishment, the patience that does not become passivity, the kindness that does not become self-abandonment, the courage that does not become cruelty, the humility that does not disappear when you are right. Those things teach the room what kind of person you are becoming. And eventually, people begin to notice. They may not say it clearly. They may not call it leadership, but they feel it. They know you are not easily pulled into unnecessary chaos. They know your words are not careless. They know your presence does not require performance. They know you can hear hard things without immediately turning them into a fight. They know you can be honest without trying to destroy. They know you can disagree without needing to dehumanize. That matters, because many rooms are desperate for someone who does not add more fire to what is already burning. A room does not always need a hero. Sometimes it needs one person who refuses to make the moment worse. One person who can hold tension without spilling it onto everyone else. One person who can remain honest without becoming harsh. One person who can stay present without becoming responsible for everything. That is leadership, even if no one calls it that. Because leadership is not only about direction, it is also about atmosphere. It is about what becomes possible because you are there. Do people become more afraid when you enter? Do they become more guarded? Do they become more performative? Do they become smaller? Or do they become more honest, more grounded, more able to breathe, more able to tell the truth, without feeling like truth will be used against them? That is not about being perfect. No one carries a perfect presence. We all have days where we bring more pressure than peace. We all have moments where our tone moves ahead of our wisdom. We all have rooms where old versions of ourselves still want to answer. But quiet leadership does not require perfection. It requires awareness, the willingness to notice what you bring, the humility to repair when you bring harm, the discipline to return to clean movement. Because calm does not automatically equal clarity. Silence does not automatically equal wisdom. Restraint does not automatically mean the movement was clean. Sometimes silence is fear. Sometimes calm is control. Sometimes distance is avoidance. Sometimes patience is delay. Because we do not want to face what must be said. That is why quiet leadership has to stay honest. It has to keep asking, am I grounded or am I hiding? Am I being patient or am I avoiding? Am I creating peace or am I protecting an image? Am I listening or am I quietly judging? Those questions keep calm from turning into pride. They keep steadiness from becoming superiority. They keep leadership from becoming control with a softer voice. Because the goal is not to become the person above the room. The goal is to become a person responsible inside the room. There is a difference. Being above the room creates distance. Being responsible inside the room creates presence. Being above the room judges the storm. Being responsible inside the room asks what clean movement looks like while the storm is happening. And Human Velocity X has never been about escaping humanity. It has been about learning how to move through humanity with more awareness, more integrity, and more responsibility. That kind of movement leaves something behind, because presence does not end when the conversation ends. It does not end when you leave the room. It does not end when the moment passes. Something remains, a tone, a feeling, a pressure, a softness, a question, a permission, a memory of how the room felt when you were there. Some people leave rooms heavier than they found them, not because they meant to, but because their presence carried pressure, criticism, urgency, unprocessed anger, a need to control, a need to be right. And when they leave, the room exhales, not in peace, in relief. And that difference matters, because relief means the pressure is gone. Peace means the pressure did not have to be there in the first place. Other people leave rooms drained. Everything moved toward them. Their pain, their story, their anger, their urgency, their need to be reassured, their need to have everyone else confirm what they were feeling. And people may still care about them, but they are tired, not because compassion was absent, because the exchange was not clean, but there is another kind of presence, the kind that leaves a room a little more honest, not perfectly healed, not suddenly fixed, not free from every problem, just more honest, a little clearer, a little calmer, a little more able to breathe. Maybe someone finally said what they had been afraid to say. Maybe two people disagreed and discovered they did not have to destroy each other. Maybe somebody heard no and realized the relationship survived. Maybe someone made a mistake and was allowed to admit it without being humiliated. Those moments may look small, but they leave something behind. Sometimes people only recognize it after you leave. They notice they did not have to perform. They notice they told the truth without being punished for it. They notice they felt seen without being owned. They notice they were challenged without being humiliated. They notice they were loved without being controlled. That is influence. Not control, not performance, not rescue. Influence, the kind that happens because the movement itself was real. Think about the people who changed you, not necessarily the people who sat you down and told you what needed to change. Think about the people who simply left something with you. Maybe it was their patience. Maybe it was their courage. Maybe it was the way they listened. Maybe it was how they stayed kind without becoming weak. Maybe it was how they admitted fault without wrapping the apology in excuses. Maybe it was how they carried pressure without turning that pressure into punishment. Maybe it was how they made you feel human when you expected judgment. They may not have known they were teaching you. They were simply living. But their movement left evidence. Evidence that honesty could be gentle. Evidence that boundaries could be loving. Evidence that strength could be quiet. evidence that pain did not have to become bitterness, evidence that peace did not have to mean passivity, evidence that a person could feel deeply and still move responsibly. Sometimes evidence is more powerful than advice, because advice tells someone what you think they should do. Evidence lets them see what is possible. You can spend hours explaining that disagreement does not have to become war, or someone can experience disagreement with you and discover they were still safe afterward. You can explain that boundaries are healthy, or they can hear you say no without hatred and experience a boundary that did not become punishment. You can explain that strength does not require cruelty, or you can remain firm in a difficult moment without trying to injure anyone. The lived movement teaches something the explanation alone cannot, and Human Velocity X has never been about telling people what to believe. It is about helping people become aware of what is moving through them, so their next movement can become more honest, more aligned, more responsible, more alive. That is what your presence can become, not a sermon, not a performance, not a demand, evidence, a living example that another kind of movement exists. But this also means we have to be honest about what we leave behind. Not to shame ourselves, not to become obsessed with how everyone experiences us, not to become responsible for every interpretation. This is about awareness, because we all leave something. Every room receives us somehow. Every conversation is affected by what we bring into it. Every relationship slowly learns what kind of movement is normal around us. If we always bring urgency, people learn to rush. If we always bring criticism, people learn to hide. If we always bring defensiveness, people learn to prepare. If we always bring emotional instability, people learn to manage us. If we always bring silence that punishes, people learn that quiet is not safe. If we always bring kindness without honesty, people learn that love avoids truth. If we always bring truth without kindness, people learn that honesty wounds. That is not meant to condemn us. It is meant to awaken us. Because awareness begins when we stop asking only, how did this room affect me? And begin asking, what did I bring into this room? What did my tone carry? What did my silence communicate? What did my reaction teach? What did my boundary protect? What did my presence make possible? Those questions are not always comfortable, but they are clean. They help us stop living as if our inner life has no atmosphere, because it does. Your inner life has weather. Your fear has weather. Your peace has weather. Your resentment has weather. Your clarity has weather. Your compassion has weather. Your unresolved pain has weather, and the people closest to you often feel that weather before you ever explain it. That does not mean you have to become perfect before entering a room. It does not mean controlling every facial expression, every word, every breath, until you become artificial. That is performance. And performance is not the goal. Responsibility is. Responsibility says, I am human. I will have moods. I will have pain. I will have tired days. I will have moments where I do not bring my best. But I will not pretend that my movement has no impact. That is maturity, not perfection. Maturity is being able to recognize when your movement was not clean and choosing repair. It is being able to say, I came into that conversation carrying too much pressure. I answered from fear. I was harsher than I meant to be. I shut down instead of telling the truth. I made that moment heavier. I need to correct my movement. And repair leaves something behind too. It leaves humility. It leaves safety. It leaves evidence that mistakes do not have to become denial. It teaches people that being wrong does not have to become humiliation, that conflict does not have to become permanent distance, that accountability does not have to destroy dignity. Maybe that is one of the most powerful things a steady person can offer. Not the illusion that you never miss it, the evidence that when you do, you know how to return. You repair, you recenter, you re-choose. That kind of presence can be trusted, not because it is flawless, because it is honest. When you become the calm one in chaos, there is a temptation to believe your job is to keep everyone calm, but that is not the invitation. The invitation is not become the emotional manager of every room you enter. The invitation is simpler and harder. Become responsible for what moves through you. That is enough. That is already a life's work, because what moves through you does not always stop with you. It enters your tone. It enters your choices. It enters how you listen. It enters how you correct. It enters how you apologize. It enters how you wait. It enters how you leave. It enters how you love. It enters how you refuse. And over time, your repeated movement becomes your signature, not your image, not your brand, not what you say you believe. Your signature, the thing people come to recognize because your life has repeated it enough times to make it visible. Some people develop a signature of pressure. Some develop a signature of avoidance. Some of criticism. Some of chaos. Some of warmth. Some of honesty. Some of steadiness. Some of safety. And this is where another difficult question appears. Not, what do I want people to think about me? That can turn into performance quickly. The better question is, what is my movement actually teaching people over time? Because eventually, your presence tells the truth, even when your words are trying to manage the story. You can say you value peace, but if every room tightens when you enter, something is speaking. You can say you value honesty, but if people feel punished for telling you the truth, something is speaking. You can say you value love, but if love always requires people to lose themselves around you, something is speaking. You can say you value growth, but if correction is never welcome, something is speaking. And the goal is not to hate yourself when you notice it. The goal is to listen, to become honest enough to ask, what has my movement been saying? And then, if necessary, choose differently. That is the hope inside awareness. Not shame, possibility, because if movement can be noticed, movement can be changed. If a pattern can be recognized, a pattern can be interrupted. If presence can carry harm, presence can also carry healing. Not because we control the room, because we become responsible inside it. You do not have to own the room to influence it. You do not have to save the room to contribute to it. You do not have to make everyone okay before you are allowed to leave. You only have to become more conscious of what you are adding. So take a moment, not to judge yourself, just to notice. When you enter a room, what tends to enter with you? Urgency, peace, defensiveness, warmth, criticism, curiosity, fear, honesty? Does your presence create space, or does it take space? Do people feel more human around you or more managed? Do they feel invited into truth or pressured into performance? Do they feel your boundary as clarity or as punishment? Do they feel your silence as peace or as withdrawal? Do they feel your strength as safety or as control? You will not get this perfect. No one does. But the question itself can change the movement. Because once you begin asking what remains after you leave, presence stops feeling accidental. It becomes something you participate in consciously, not to perform, not to please, not to manage every reaction, but to carry your own life with enough awareness that you do not keep spilling what has not been healed onto people who did not cause it. That is soft strength, to feel without flooding the room, to speak without sharpening the wound, to set boundaries without closing your heart, to remain calm without becoming superior, to bring peace without making peace another form of control, to leave behind something cleaner than what entered with you. And maybe that is what real influence looks like. Not control, not performance, not being needed, not being admired. Maybe influence is sometimes much quieter than that. After you leave, someone breathes a little deeper. Someone tells the truth a little sooner. Someone becomes less afraid of honesty. Someone realizes that a boundary does not have to mean rejection. Someone notices that disagreement did not become war. Someone remembers that they do not have to become the storm around them. Someone sees that strength can stay soft. Someone experiences peace as something real. Not because you explained peace to them, but because you carried it. Not perfectly, responsibly. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is more than enough. Thank you for spending this time with me. If today's conversation found you where you are, share it with someone who may need the reminder. Not because they need another lesson. Maybe they just need to know that becoming calm does not mean becoming responsible for everyone else's chaos. If you are enjoying Human Velocity X, subscribe, follow, and join us on Facebook, not for noise, for the conversation that continues between episodes. Next week, We continue this movement into another difficult place, because once people begin trusting your steadiness, another temptation can appear. You may begin believing you have to save them. You may begin thinking that because you can see the pattern, you must prevent every consequence. You may begin carrying what was never yours in the name of love. So next time, we are going to look at the difference between helping someone and saving someone, the difference between support and rescue, the difference between compassion and carrying a life that does not belong to you. Until then, remember, every day is awesome. We just have to get through it.